Let's get this shit started.
This is the Down and Dirty Dynasty Fantasy Football Podcast with your host, Nick Anderson.
What is up, Dynasty Degenerates? This is your boy, Nick Anderson, with the Down and Dirty Dynasty Fantasy Football Podcast, or as y'all know it, the Triple DFFP. And y'all, I'm burning the late night oils tonight. It is 2 a.m. where I am at, but fantasy football doesn't sleep, and neither do I, because I absolutely have to get out to you my breakdown of Thursday Night Football, where we've got the Bengals going up against the Browns. We've got Joe Burrow going up against Baker Mayfield. We've got Joe Mixon up against the two-headed monster of Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. And we've got OBJ versus A.J. Green. And you guys, this should be an interesting one. We've got some things that we've got to see out of Joe Burrow. And goddamn, do we have some things that we need to see out of Baker Mayfield. You know, so let's just start to get into this because I'm excited to break it down with y'all. But so I was talking to my boy Philip Caldwell from Pro Football Focus the other day, and he was talking to me about his consistency metric. If you guys watch the podcast, you've seen his consistency metric out there. And so I'm just going to break down a couple of these key points about this. You know, when we're looking at the Browns, Philip does a great job at being able to show us average points and the consistency points that are in correlation with that. So he talks about the average points that a fantasy or that a team allows another team to put up against them in fantasy football wise per position. And then he also tells us the corresponding number that says how correlated it is. So, I mean, when we're looking at the Browns, so this is comparing what the Bengals can put on the Browns and what the Browns can put on the Bengals. So the Browns allow 20.88 fantasy points to the quarterback position, 33 to the running back position, 28 to the wide receiver, 20.45 to the tight end, you know. And then the Bengals on the other side allow 16 points to the quarterback, so a little bit stiffer competition, 26 points to the running back, 28 points to the wide receiver, and 14 points to the tight end. So a stiffer defense by the Bengals overall. But, you know, there's a lot of meat on the bone when we're looking at this matchup between these two teams. So we're looking at, I'm just going to throw this out there right now. I think that Joe Burrow is going to pull out a win on prime time. I think that he's going to get on national television. I think the kid is clutch. Now, I'm not the biggest Burrow fan in the world. Don't get me wrong. I think he's got kind of that, like, he's got that frat boy mentality to him. Like he wears two polos popped up and has boat shoes on. And it's not really my vibe. But I think that Joe Burrow is going to be a baller. And I saw everything that I needed to see from him out of that last drive last week to me believe that he's going to be a great quarterback in the NFL. But, you know, he's not my flavor. But I think he's going to pull out a win on prime time in Thursday Night Football. But what does that win look like? Because that's what we care about in fantasy football. At the end of the day, I don't give a shit who wins the game. As long as, I mean, my Chiefs got to win the game. But I don't give a shit who else wins the game as long as I win my fantasy football matchup. So let's jump into it right now, you know. Let's talk about where we see everyone panning out. And the only way that we can do that is by looking at last week. So Baker Mayfield and the Browns faced off against a stout Ravens offense. And in that matchup, Mayfield only threw for 189 passing yards. He had a touchdown and an interception, but he was bad last week, you guys. But he was bad by product of the Ravens getting to him. They were in the backfield constantly, and they were disrupting the wide receivers as well. And so when we're looking at that, we've got new offensive lineman Jack Conklin that was supposed to solidify that offensive line out with an ankle and a finger injury. We've got Wills, you know, out on, I don't even remember what his injury is, but he's injured as well. They're questionable for the game, and they were injured last week. So that could make a huge difference in what this Browns front offensive line can do to protect Baker and in turn allow him to get the ball out there. But last week we saw a very interesting story in the rushing game of the Browns. We saw Nick Chubb get 10 carries to Kareem Hunt's 13 carries. Who would have ever thought that that was said? Nick Chubb, one of the purest runners in the NFL, got out-touched by Kareem Hunt in rushes alone. It's crazy, but it's not crazy when you think about it, guys. Stefanski is coming from a Vikings offense that had and built the playbook around Dalvin Cook. Which of the running backs in Cleveland are more akin to Dalvin Cook? Is it Kareem Hunt? Yes. Or is it Nick Chubb? No. He likes that slasher receiving back running back, and Kareem Hunt fits that mold. Now, I'm not saying that Nick Chubb's going to fall by the wayside. Don't get me wrong. I think that they're going to have a 50-50, God forbid a 60-40 split in Kareem Hunt's favor. But I think that this is going to be a constant nagging problem for Nick Chubb owners all year long. If you're in redraft right now, I'm advising every Nick Chubb owner today. If you are a Nick Chubb owner, before this week happens, and if you can't get it done before this week happens, do it after because he's going to have a good week. Sell Nick Chubb for Jonathan Taylor. The opposing team might not know what they have on their hands just yet, and you might be able to sell on the name value of Nick Chubb. Sell Nick Chubb for Jonathan Taylor in redraft. In Dynasty, I'm saying right now, the more this timeshare goes on between Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, the more Nick Chubb's name is going to become synonymous with running back by committee. And as each week passes and they split carries more and more and more, knowing that there's 2 more years on contract for Kareem Hunt, I think that Nick Chubb's value is going to do nothing but fall. I think that you might be getting ahead of the decline right now, and I don't think it's reactionary if you sell him for a player like DeAndre Swift. If you can luck out, if you have ill-informed dynasty owners in your league and you can sell Nick Chubb for J.K. Dobbins right now, jump all over that. I mean, fucking slam that accept button so hard that it blows everybody's mind because that trade needs to happen right now. And I'm getting out on Nick Chubb. I'm pulling the chute on him, and I don't think that it's being overreactionary. But last week, we saw Jarvis Landry have 61 receiving yards on 5 catches with 0 touchdowns. OBJ had an abysmal week last week with 3 receptions for 22 receiving yards, and Austin Hooper had a terrible week as well. David Njoku was the star of the tight ends, but he's injured now. So it's the Austin Hooper show. And I've told you guys before, and I'll say it again. I think that Austin Hooper was a system tight end. I think that he was built up by the Atlanta Falcons' high-flying passing attack, and I think that he's going to struggle in Cleveland. And I think that week 1 was a great indication of that. But now that he's got David Njoku out of his way, we'll see how it works. But those are the stats against a stout Ravens offense that the Browns had to go up against last week. Let's look at Cincinnati, who played the Chargers. And the Chargers were no different. I mean, they were out there hitting and they were playing well. But Joe Burrow had 23 passes for 193 yards, 0 touchdowns, but 1 interception. The one area where he excelled at was he had 8 rushing attempts for 46 yards and a touchdown. And on that touchdown run, gosh dang, did he look good. He was directing his blockers. He was seeing open lanes. Man, it made me excited about this kid. And not to mention, like I said, on that last drive, Joe Burrow looked like an NFL quarterback in his first outing. He was a game manager. He was putting the ball where it needed to be. And if it weren't for a weak-ass push-off by A.J. Green, that would have been a game winner for him. And he would have won in, like, on the freaking 0 mark, a comeback victory in his first game in the NFL. Joe Mixon had a terrible game last week. He had 19 carries for 69 rushing yards. He only had 1 reception for 2 receiving yards, and he put up a fumble. I expect him to bounce back this week, but good Lord, was that a bad showing. A.J. Green was the star of the show. He got targeted 9 times, but only came down with 5 of the receptions for 51 yards. Tyler Boyd had 33 yards in receiving. Gio got a little bit in the game, and John Ross was out there for a surprising number of plays, guys. And this is something to keep an eye on because I'm telling you, John Ross is a dynamic playmaker who is lightning fast and can take the ball to the house at any time. And if he can get his health under him, then he's going to be a valuable asset for Joe Burrow moving forward, okay? There was an incredibly low yards after catch in this game. I mean, everything about both games that we had last week, the Browns and the Bengals, spelled bad things for their players. But I think that it's going to be a get-right week on Thursday Night Football. I know that usually Thursday Night Football, we have a little bit of a hangover. It's a little bit of shitty games. But I think that this might be the difference because it's week 2. It's not like they're drug out, they're tired, they're dragging. They're still fresh. And I think that Joe Burrow is going to look much more crisp than we saw in week 1. So when we're looking at the matchup between the two of these, let's look at the Bengals. The Bengals have a 10th-ranked defensive line and a 17th-ranked secondary, okay? So what does that mean for Baker Mayfield and his Browns? Well, I'm not here to tell you. I'm not the biggest Baker Mayfield fan, I haven't been a fan since he came into the NFL, and he's never shown me anything that told me that this kid is elite. I just don't think he is. But son of a bitch if he doesn't have elite weapons around him. Now, I think that OBJ is going to have a bounce back week this week. I think against the 17th ranked Bengals secondary, I think that he is going to feast, especially with the possibility that Jarvis Landry isn't going to be in the game. I think that he might have to be the show in town aside from Kareem Hunt, aside from maybe Austin Hooper. I don't know. Or maybe Rashad Higgins. But OBJ's the truth in this one. And I've told you guys, and I've told you guys, and I've told you guys, a healthy OBJ is a dangerous OBJ. And I think that he's got even more to prove after a shitty week 1. So I expect him to come out guns blazing. And I honestly think that OBJ is going to get himself a vintage OBJ week. I think he might hit around 100 receiving yards and get a touchdown on this. That's what I'm projecting for him because I just think that he is healthy right now. And I know there's contention in the locker room. I know that they're talking about a trade. The player's got to play. And I think that he's going to play this week. So then we look at the other receivers. If Jarvis is there, if Jarvis is playing, he can be your wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 this week. I think he'll get somewhere around 70, 80 receiving yards, something like that, on 7 or 8 catches. So, I think that he'll be serviceable this week if he's healthy. But that's the big question. And I've looked at all the injury reports. I don't have an answer for you. It's going to be a game-time decision. You're going to have to watch everything that comes out before Thursday Night Football happens. So then we look at the rest of the team. I think Austin Hooper's going to have a lackluster game again. I think he's going to do better than week 1, but it's hard to do worse than that. Probably about, 40, 50 receiving yards. I just don't think that he's got the juice to succeed in this team. David Njoku outplayed him week 1 handedly. Luckily, David Njoku is injured for Austin Hooper, so he's going to get a little bit more of the work, but I just don't think that he's the guy. But we look at the 2 people that I think are going to be the guy in this game, and it's going to be Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Start them without fear, without doubt, without anything, because, last week Cincinnati let the Chargers run all over them. They made Josh Kelly, who I'm huge on. I'm very excited about the kid. But they made Josh Kelly look real. They made Austin Eckler look great. But the week before, we're looking at Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, who both put up over 5.5 yards per carry last week. They're 2 of the finest rushers in the NFL, 2 of the greatest talents in the rushing field. I think that both of them are going to get above 85 rushing yards. I think that there's a chance that both of them get a touchdown. And I think that Kareem Hunt is going to have 30-plus receiving yards in this game. They're both going to eat. And like I said earlier, if Nick Chubb has a blow-up game, a get-right game, this is the time to sell him. Capitalize on his success in this semi-soft Thursday Night Football matchup and turn his ass quick. But that's where I think the Browns are going to be on that one. But let's look over to the Cincinnati Bengals, Got Joe Burrow throwing the ball. And I think that, we're looking at these matchups. I think this is going to be a get-right game for Tyler Boyd, who had a shitty week 1. I think that Tyler Boyd is going to be the primary target in this game. Maybe 80 receiving yards, a touchdown. I think that A.J. Green's going to be a little bit behind him, maybe like 75 receiving yards. I think they're going to pace each other really well. But I am anticipating Tyler Boyd coming down with a touchdown in this one. I think that John Ross is that guy. He's that X factor. He's that one that you don't know about because he's been so injured. We just saw Paris Campbell pop off the page this week. He's an injury-prone guy, but man, is he electric when he gets the ball in his hands, and John Ross is a lot the same way. I would not be surprised to see John Ross have a 50, 60-yard breakaway play where he takes a tutty to the house. Joe Burrow gets him the ball, and he takes one, 50, 60 yards to the house because he's got that in his wheelhouse every single time. So if you're looking for like a crazy, if you were in the thinnest of thinnest leagues and you need a flex play, I might put my money on John Ross, but that's the thinnest of leagues. He's not a start in any 10-team, 12-team, anything like that. But I do think that Tyler Boyd can be a wide receiver 2-3 this week, and I think that A.J. Green could be a flex play, 70, 75 yards with 7 receptions, something like that. Then we look at, Gio's going to get his little bit. I'm not worried about CJ Uzomah. I don't think that anybody should be starting him. If you are, then you're a fool. But then we look at Joe Mixon. And again, like I said, Joe Mixon had a rough week 1. But again, I think this is going to be a redemption song for all of these guys this week because I think that he's going to come back and have somewhere around 85, 90 rushing yards, maybe even more, because you look at what the Browns did last week against the Ravens. They held the Ravens to 111 rushing yards, but they held the Ravens to 111 rushing yards because the Ravens were fucking throwing all over them. They couldn't stop the Ravens and Lamar Jackson from throwing all over them. So it's a little bit of a skewed number there because they didn't have to rush. There was no need to rush on them. So when you look at, we got Joe Mixon rushing the ball now. I think that he's going to get, 85, 90 rushing yards. And I honestly believe that he's going to get a pair of touchdowns in this game too. So I'm expecting big things from Joe Mixon. Start him as your running back one the way that you drafted him. So at the end of the game, I think that it's going to be a really successful fantasy football matchup for all of these guys. Middle of the road defenses make for great fantasy football performances. We talked about the points allowed from Philip Caldwell's consistency metric from Pro Football Focus. These are generous defenses that allow generous points to other teams, to opposing teams. I think that Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb are going to have banner days. I think that Joe Mixon is going to have a banner day. I think that Tyler Boyd is going to have a get-right game. I think OBJ is going to have a vintage OBJ game. I'm not starting either Joe Burrow or Baker Mayfield if I have the option. Just because we're going to see good things out of these guys doesn't mean that it's going to be a high-flying affair. We're talking about 2 rushing touchdowns from each team possibly. It could be a grinder. I think it's going to be a close game all around, but I think that the skill positions, the running backs, the wide receivers in this game, they're going to be the ones that come out on top and victorious in this, and hopefully your fantasy football team will with them at the helm as well. So you guys, that's my Thursday night football takes. That's what I've got about the Cincinnati Bengals versus the Cleveland Browns. I'm excited about this game. I'm just excited that fantasy football's back, you guys. I'm excited that I get to watch it on TV and I don't have to work tomorrow. So I'm going to be grinding, watching film from week 1, getting you guys more tasty takes to be able to put out on the podcast for y'all. That was a couple T's and some P's in there, but the triple DFFP is all about the letters. So you guys, thank you for tuning in. Those are my takes. I hope you like them, but if you don't, fuck it, because I'm drunk.